In option C so far, we've been studying biodiversity and how ecological change and conservation preserves biodiversity. One of the ways that change happens in an ecosystem is what we call succession. It can happen animal or plant life. I have an example here of just plant life. And we've seen from learning trophic levels that you need to build a base of life first before you can have a more complicated, more advanced organism. And this has to do with trophic levels and the movement of energy. And so in this example of plants, we're starting here with something very simple like mosses, right? Which are pretty easy to get going. Remember, mosses don't need roots. Very simple photosynthetic type of life. Once the mosses get going there, they will change, as we'll see, abiotic factors. And then small herbs can get in there. Then larger plants go in there, shrubs, and finally trees. But if you go to an area that's pretty barren and try and just put trees in there to begin with, you're probably going to have a lot of trouble getting those guys going there. Okay, so that's the basic idea of succession, right? What is going on there? Why is it possible for bigger, more complex organisms to get in there? Because the smaller guys are changing the abiotic environment. Remember, there was very little living there to begin with. So you have soil which really doesn't have much in it. And as small guys get going there, like grass and so forth, they will eventually put organic material into the soil, certainly as they die and so forth, plow them into the soil. The soil then begins to get deeper, so it could hold plants that have a bigger root system. The soil begins to stop erosion from happening and retains more water. And finally, you have a abiotic environment, the soil, that's able to sustain much larger living things there. Okay, so succession can be thought of in two different ways. It's what we call primary and what we call secondary succession. So let's talk about primary first of all, right? Primary is where you're really starting from scratch. So there's just nothing there. It's just bare rock or sand or something like that. And this is going to happen very, very slow. It takes a long time for it to get going. And you need to basically, like as I just explained to you, build up the soil. Okay, so what kind of event would create primary succession there? Well, it's got to be a massive event there, which is really just kind of wiping out what you had there. So, for example, you could have a lava flow, glacier retreat, what's going on in Greenland right now, or volcano, right, which just totally obliterates the area. You have a nuclear bomb explode and you're left with nothing. And up in the Northwest here, we kind of had an event like that. We had a terrible event called Mount St. Helens, which erupted in 1980, which just totally wiped out an area. And now you have a whole new place where things can move in and start growing there, and that's primary succession. Who are the first guys who come in? Well, like I explained to you in the little slide on succession, they're called pioneer species. They're guys who need very, very little to get going there. Grasses, lichen, moss, things like that. Secondary succession is a little more confusing. Secondary succession is where you have an event that doesn't totally wipe out your area, but it clears it out a little bit, and that allows other guys to move in there. So it's a type of disturbance. So you don't completely destroy the soil, you don't completely destroy the vegetation. What are we talking about here? Oh, forest fires, hurricanes, clear cutting, harvesting fields, things like that. And you still have a lot of nutrients and so forth. So if you had a major fire, chances are a lot of the small animals, for example, would hide underground until the fire passed, and then they come back out. There's a lot of plants that have root systems underground. Even if the top of them get burnt out, they're still pretty much okay to get going there. So that's secondary succession. Secondary succession would continue then to build up the area until you get a very dense biodiverse area, and it stops evolving, really. And at that point, we call it the climax community. Redwood forest, for example. Old growth forest, right? So all the abiotic conditions are there, and you get the strongest guys who are able to live there. Okay? And this will stay that way and be dominated until you have some major disturbance again, which will cause the succession events to happen.